All right, welcome to another episode of the Music Journal podcast. Today is unfortunately a pretty depressing, sad day. I'm in a pretty weird mood right now. If you've been following the show for a little bit, maybe you've heard episode 9 of this podcast. I'm actually gonna put it here at the end of this episode. But episode 9 was with a friend of mine. Her name was Carla. And at the time that we recorded the podcast episode, she had lung cancer. And she had lung cancer for a couple years. And unfortunately, I guess maybe not unfortunately for her, because she was kind of going through a lot of pain and life definitely wasn't super easy for her. But today she passed away. So it's a pretty surreal thing for me to be kind of talking about and experiencing. I actually wasn't even going to make an episode for today. I was just going to call it, but I got inspired to start working on a song about it and about her, and I kind of gained some momentum, and from there I kind of decided that I was going to just last minute real quick make this episode. And I just kind of want to share with you, I guess, some of my philosophies about life in general, because, you know, Carla, she was 24 years old when this happened, and to just give you a little bit of her backstory, I guess, first of all, our backstory, she's actually the first person that I ever fully finished a song with, start to finish, that's unfortunately not seen the light of day, but I really credit her for having taught me how to write a hook. She probably doesn't even know that, or probably didn't even know that. Most people probably don't even know that, but it was through that collaboration, because I used to literally just sit at the piano and try, because I'm a piano player first, and I would try to like play a melody, but the way you do a melody is so much different than when you put words to it, and that's not something that I realized until we did our first collaboration. That was our first or second year of college, and it's pretty crazy to me that she's not here anymore, and we actually never even got to see each other again after that recording. And it's really weird for me because she was in town and she texted me, but she was going through this crazy chemotherapy process, and just scheduling wise, it never worked out, and that's going to be a big regret of mine for a really long time, that I never got to kind of make that last visit. But it's crazy because, you know, I'm 25, she was 24, and it never really crossed my mind that anytime soon, this was going to happen. So life is short, and you're young, and you think you're immortal, and you have all this time to do all this shit, but the fact of the matter is you really don't, because she spent the last couple years of her life, I mean, she made the most of it, because she's fucking dope, and she's the strongest person I think I've ever met in my entire life. There's aspects of her story that I really want to share, but I don't know if it's really my place, but I do want to, I think this is important. Before she got diagnosed, she'd actually had lung cancer already, but it was one of those things where she didn't want to seem like she was going through a hard time, or try to complain, because she felt like everybody else was also going through their own shit and going through a hard time. And it literally got to a point where we were in our last year of college or whatever, seniors, and she's in her bed, and she woke up and literally couldn't move. She couldn't fucking do anything. And at first, before it even had gotten to that point, she thought it was just stress that she was dealing with. And she went to, what happened was she was yelling from her bed, and no one was home, so no one heard her. But eventually somebody who wasn't even her roommate, it was like her roommate's friend or something, heard her and then came and sorry, let me turn my phone on mute. Her roommate's friend heard her and then came into the room and then called 911, and they they picked her up in an ambulance, took her to the hospital. And what had actually happened was this point is where she realized something was wrong and something was up. But the doctor just kind of brushed her away. He was like, "No, I think you're fine. You just have some sort of like whatever." Yeah, I don't remember exactly what he said, but he basically said like, "You're fine." Didn't check her out or x-ray her or anything. And if he had x-rayed her that day, then they would have caught the cancer before it had reached the point of stage 4. So it wasn't till X number of years later, maybe like 1, maybe 2 years later, she just suddenly collapses and breaks her ribs or something. She might have even fallen down the stairs, I don't remember. But regardless, she fell, and she was taken to the hospital again, and they checked her out this time and saw that she had lung cancer for years. And it was something that was with her, but wasn't ever discovered in a timely fashion. So at this point, it was kind of too late to really do anything about it. So the case that she had was super rare. So it's pretty crazy because she actually became kind of like a public figure within that community. And she was already fucking killing it too. She had this big Instagram page called Beats in Bed with like 30,000 followers, and she was just this dope fucking singer with this incredibly unique voice and this amazing gift for lyricism that stems from all of her insane experiences of being on her own from when she was like 15 or 16, and having to do some fucked up shit. We're talking shit that like none of us have probably ever experienced to make ends meet. If you can kind of imagine what that is. It's not really my place to say, so I'm gonna not, but take it as you will from that. And she's been a victim of fucking. There was one story that I wanted her to tell on the podcast actually, but she kind of said it, but in not so many words. I'm just gonna say it now, I guess. But there's one point where she was performing as a backup vocalist. She was hired as a backup vocalist for this up-and-coming artist that was getting signed to, I think she did sign. She signed to Atlantic, I think. I don't want to say the label just in case I'm wrong too. She was signed to one of the major labels. And one of the producers, he would always like kind of cross the line a little bit, and she felt that she had to kind of appease this dude because he was like this producer that was in this position of power, and she was just the fucking backup singer. And it got to a point where like he would text her and shit, and he was like, "Hey, like let me just, I don't have a place to sleep, let me just like sleep at your place." And he like gets in her bed and shit, and they didn't do anything, but he just like escalated himself into her personal space essentially, and put himself in her bed, and just weirdly fucking spent the night there. And then Carla actually got blamed for the whole thing, and got kicked out of the fucking group. So it's fucking wild. How does somebody like that end up in a situation like this? And unfortunately gone at 24 and kind of not able to have even shared even that minor story from her story. So I guess my point is, life is short, and the whole point of it, having known somebody who unfortunately has lost theirs so young, literally at my age, in my opinion, I think the point of it is to do as much as you possibly can with it that you want to do. So if your goal is to, it doesn't matter what it is. This is a music podcast. So let's say your goal is to produce amazing music. Then the point of your life is to do as much of that as possible while maintaining a healthy emotional balance. Because at the end of the day, the way that you create your greatest work is if you're feeling emotionally healthy and emotionally in a good place. At the same time, the way you get there is by creating this career for yourself where you can do that. So it's the whole concept of like attracts like, and it all kind of fuels itself, and it comes around, and one thing strengthens the other, and if you can master that, then you lived a good life regardless of how long it is. Because I've always believed that a quality life is better than a long one. With a short life of quality is better than a long one without the quality and without the substance. So if you spend 100 years doing something that you don't want to do for the majority of it, then you could have probably been better. You probably would have been happier in your final hours being 24 and having done something that was dope. And I think ultimately that's something that we take for granted. I know I take it for granted, and it's something that I often allow myself to forget. And it's something I'm going to try to be a lot more conscious of remembering moving forward. So that's kind of what I wanted to say. I wanted to play you, since this is a music podcast, I want to play you a snippet of the song that I'm working on right now. It all stemmed from this whole concept of they say the circle of life, quote unquote circle, right? But today I was thinking about it, and I was like, where was the fucking circle here? It's more like a line, huh? So that's kind of where lyrically this song that I'm working on started. But I also kind of want to give you a glimpse into my process as well. I'll tell you some of the little secrets that I'm doing production wise with the song, and yeah, I'll play you what I have now, and then you'll also hear that the way songs start are never how they end. So you'll hear this snippet now, and then you'll hear when the final thing comes out, it's going to be totally different than what it is now. And actually, in a way, what I did in this song is I actually sampled Carla's vocals from the original song we did like not a decade ago, like how many fucking years ago? Maybe like 7 years ago. I sampled some of Carla's vocals and I pitched them and I added effects and stuff like that. So in a way, that trash song that I made, it was trash not because of her, it was because of me, just because I sucked. It was my first song. But that trash song evolved into this new one that I'm working on now. So it's just kind of the process of making music, and I talk about it a lot with different producers and artists that I have on the show. And any artist that I've talked to that's been putting out music and finishes songs goes through this process of making something bad or even just not as good as it could be, and then from that it leads to something else, which leads to something else, which ultimately ends up being the finished product. Which ironically also kind of brings me to the last point that I wanted to make in this episode, which is in the next week's episode. It's probably going to be my final episode of the season. I'm really not in the mood, to be talking about what I'm working on right now, because of just everything that's been happening today, just personally with me. But I'm also going to explain everything in that episode. So it's going to be this one, then next week's to close out the season, and then you're going to find out what the next podcast move is for me. And it just kind of goes to my point that like it started with the music journal. It actually started with a music production course that I created, and I was profiting off of and helping producers learn how to produce and sell jingles and do stuff like that. And then that transitioned into a podcast, which is what I'm literally here doing now. And that's transitioning into this new project. So it all kind of ties together. And, I'm only 25, so my I guess, knowledge might be somewhat limited. But just from having talked to a lot of older people and seeing a lot of lives start and end, and having friends get addicted to drugs and stuff like that, and being a music producer at all, an artist, this is kind of my philosophy and take on how life works and what it is. So, go out and make the most of yours after you hear this. I know it's a little depressing, but hopefully still inspiring. So yeah, I guess I'll play you that snippet of that song right now, and then we'll come back and I'll debunk some of the production secrets that I used on it. Everything happens, but it's never for a reason. My heart is fucking heavy, but yours, it stopped beating. I speak to you indirectly, I know that you won't hear me. Don't know where this road is going, I'll be damned that it won't scare me. They say life is like a circle when you coming around. 24 years young, that was a fast round. Cause if life is like a circle, but the world didn't deserve you, then I think you gotta tell me where you at now. If angels land in heaven, I know you're no exception. Our memories all I'm left with. I guess there is no question. So that's what I got right now. It's kind of like a pre-chorus and then a chorus, and I'm gonna write a verse, either one long verse or multiple verses. I haven't decided yet, but it started with the keys part, and then I layered it with the organ. So that's what kind of gives it the unique kind of haunting feel with the keys. But what I was really going for in terms of just the haunting kind of feel, the way that I was able to capture that, I don't know if you heard it or not, but I took the reverb from the keys. I added reverb to the keys first, and then I put a delay, a quarter note delay on the reverb. And then after I did that, I printed that delay onto an audio track, and then I reversed each bar of it. So it kind of has like a suction kind of sound after it hits, and then that delay comes, the quarter note delay, but it's in reverse, which gives it this kind of like pull kind of sound. And I have a couple other reverse things too, like I have a reverse light bulb crashing sound, and then I think the sample of Carla singing is really the glue to the whole fucking thing and really makes it so. To me, this is a really special project, and it's one that I'm really looking forward to finishing, and I'm hopefully going to be really proud of. So that's that. Yeah, I definitely, just so you don't have to go all the way back to episode 9, I'm literally just gonna copy paste episode 9 right here so you can hear it. It's one of my favorite episodes that I've ever done of all time, and honestly, anything that Carla touched just turned to fucking gold. So give it a listen if you want. It's right here if you haven't heard it, or listen to it again if you had, with a new perspective. And I'll see you next week. Peace. Welcome to the Music Journal Podcast, where we talk about the hottest things happening in music right now, and also how you can apply it if you're an aspiring producer or musician yourself. I'm your host, Wes Yee. I'm a producer, artist, and educator, and I'm stoked to be chatting with you. Let's make history. All right, welcome to another episode of the Music Journal. Today we have a very special guest. Her name is Carla Nelson. I don't really say this about a lot of people, but Carla is hands down just the strongest person I've ever met in my entire life. It's funny because we kind of started our friendship behind a microphone. The first hip hop song that I ever wrote just as an artist under my own name, was a co-write with Carla, which unfortunately never made it out because of my own insecurities at the time. Obviously things have changed since then, but yeah, it's totally cool to kind of be behind the mic once again with Carla. I know it's going to be very natural for her. She's an amazing singer, an amazing artist, and unfortunately she had a tragedy strike recently. She was diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer, which is pretty difficult for me to kind of say and even think about, just knowing her and having known her for so long. But she's a fucking warrior, and it's really cool to have her here and share that story and talk about it. Carla, thanks for being on the podcast.
Thanks for inviting me. I didn't even know that it was like due to the insecurities that the song never came out, because I think the song was about insecurities.
Oh, it totally
was, right? So that would have actually been perfect.
Well, it only makes sense because that's how I was feeling at the time. So that's why the song ended up being about that. Yeah, absolutely. Carla, I totally want to just kind of take a back seat, I think, for this episode and just kind of let you share your story. I think in terms of like philosophies and stuff like that, you really have a lot of experience that kind of have shaped your views. And I know just from hanging out with you all day today, I've learned just a shit ton. And kind of hearing your perspective on things like life and just everything in general is really amazing to me. And I feel really fortunate to have been able to spend that time with you.
Yeah, we had an amazing day with like iced coffee, burritos, quesadillas, and then like sprinkled some philosophies about, you know, life and death in there.
Those are some of my favorite things in the world, by the way.
Same. That's what probably bonded it. It was like, how to speak truths is no better way than with, you know, classic Mexican food.
Yeah. Bingo. Yeah. I want to just shut the fuck up for a little bit. Do you mind just telling the listeners a little bit about your story? You've got a really crazy one. Feel free to start wherever you want and end wherever you want.
Okay. Well, I guess we'll kind of, you know, do the highlights of it. So as Wes mentioned, like we met at school a few years back at Berklee College of Music, and close to my, I guess, 7th semester, I was home for Christmas, and I had been dealing with some insane back pain and like coughs, and I gave in, went to the doctor, and literally within 3 days, my life kind of went like in 180 on me. And I had this intense diagnosis, and the initial prognosis was stage 4 lung cancer, typically 6 to 9 weeks. And that's a huge piece of information to, you know, swallow. I was 22 years old and just had everything kind of flipped on me. And actually, I guess the best way to describe it is if you're like reading a book and you finish a chapter and then you start the next chapter and suddenly all of the characters change, the entire storyline changes, and you're like, am I still reading the same book? Like, wow. My life just did not, you know, feel the same way. And that was kind of like the initial feeling, which was then immediately followed by this insane like fighter instinct that just got turned on. And I think I do strive best when everything is against me. I've noticed this trend because the doctors and even the cancer itself, nothing about it was positive. Like, of the lung cancer that I had one of these rare mutations where there wasn't even like a real treatment option for me. The doctors were not positive at all. And so a lot of things were downhill, but that kind of encouraged me to kind of create my own reality as to how this was going to end up. And I became like the most like, I guess, strong version of myself. It just like everything clicked into place. And so now, like, fast forward a year and a half later, I've been through 4 chemotherapies, 7 operations. Basically traveling back and forth between Germany and America for this new trial that I'm on. And like, I kind of managed to live up to that reality that I initially wanted for myself, which was, the wish wasn't, let me be healthy, it was let me be happy. And I think a lot of people like they think those are conditions of each other. Like you can only be happy if you have your health.
Interesting.
And now I'd like to tell you all that, like, yes, health is something we take for granted, especially when we're very young. But it is not a condition for your happiness necessarily. And I've managed to put myself into a place where I have all my conditions for my happiness fulfilled. So I feel good with me. I feel good with the people in my life. I'm doing what I love to do. And that's really the pyramid, you know? Yeah. So like, be good to yourself, be good to others, do what you love to do.
I think it's really incredible and really powerful that you have been able to find happiness despite your health situation. It's such a classic like bad thing happening to a good person, you know what I mean? And the whole thing is like, people want to believe that if you're a good person, you know, you're immune to whatever, but it's really not the case. And what I thought initially before we even met up today that was so amazing is when we were talking on Instagram, you said something. It was something along the lines of I want to show people that it's not as bad as people think it is. Because when you said that, first of all, it made me think of everything that I've ever fucking complained about, and all of a sudden I was like, you know what, none of that stuff was really that bad if I really like go back to it and really think about it. I mean, compared to what you're going through, obviously it's really trivial. At what point do you think you were able to kind of realize that? Because I assume, I guess, like right when you got the diagnosis and you found out, I can't imagine that you were okay with it. Obviously it took some time to process. What at what point did you kind of just realize like, okay, I can be sick? And it still feels weird for me to say that even, which is totally crazy, just because we've been hanging out all day, and I feel like throughout the whole day I've been like I've just been forgetting.
That's good.
It's just like, that's good. We're catching up, like we haven't seen each other in a while, but
yeah, that makes me so happy that you say that, because it's I don't want to like deny the fact that I am sick. That is a part of my story, and I'm very aware of it, but it is also not my identity as a person. And I think I'm lucky in the sense that I had so many very strong personality traits that had crystallized over like me growing up, that it was easy for me to hang on to other things. Like this is not the most prominent thing about me. It is a part of my existence, but if I have to describe myself to a person, the fact that I have cancer is like not the initial thing about me that sticks out. No. And so that is actually really nice to hear, that you kind of just forget while hanging out, because believe me, it is still a reality that I live in. And so it's nice to just be more than that to other people.
I love that you have kind of separated your identity from like what you're dealing with, because obviously it's such a prominent part of your life, and you're traveling a lot. Like I don't see you as often as I used to, obviously, because well, actually, I guess I am kind of seeing you because you come to Boston.
Well, now we can totally like hang out more often, because I'm definitely here for this trial that's only happening at this hospital, and I can only get the treatment here. So I'll be in town, basically.
I think your whole story is insane. Do you mind sharing some of the stuff that happened to you previously? Because I feel like a lot of that stuff has really just kind of added up to your strength and your ability to kind of think about the situation you're in positively, just because you've been through, like you told me this crazy story in the car today about a producer that you used to work with, if you don't mind.
Oh, yeah.
I know you already said it, but if you don't mind saying it one more time.
Yeah, so I guess what kind of circles into that is that out of every negative experience that you go through, you can, obviously, the oldest saying in the book, you know, depends on perspective, right? So like any hardship that we go through, you kind of have the choice to control what it does to you. That there being, of course, no excuse for people treating each other badly, but right. When I started school, I had some initial bad experiences with like men in the music field. They were, producers or people who had higher positions than I did. And this was very new to me because I had never had the feeling that I had to prove my worth as a musician or a singer, or like my value in the musical field. And so suddenly I was being confronted with people using their their position, and also the fact that they were dominant men, to kind of control how I was supposed to act within this actually professional setting. So that was a huge struggle, and it happened, several times where I was being undermined because of the fact that I was, a female or a singer or like a backup singer. So something that was kind of easily, used as a pawn. And what it did was, yes, of course, I did have some moments where I had to like seriously kind of reflect on this situation. Like, why are people treating me like this? How is this fair as a female? Or like, how can people listen to me if they won't let me use my voice? That kind of, these questions. And what I ended up doing was that I kind of did the math. I was like, okay, there's these male producers who are trying to like use me to their advantage and undermining me and not taking me seriously, and it bleeding to like sexual harassment. Why don't I just learn what they're giving me, which is the production aspect, and then I no longer rely on that person in the equation. So that was kind of my, I guess, what helped me win in this situation was like, okay, you put me down. Well, I'm just going to cancel you out now. Like, I have no need for your, for your person and for your talent or what you bring to the table, because I can bring that myself now.
Right.
And so I encourage that actually, like, for women in not just the music field, in any business field, if they're feeling like they're not being taken seriously or being treated badly, think about like, what is this person giving you, and is there any way that you can give that to yourself?
I love that. And just to kind of paraphrase what actually happened, this guy, he was the producer and you were the background singer of the group. And he basically forced himself or pressured himself into your room in your first semester, and totally like classic, like take advantage of this person who is essentially powerless in your situation. And he just kind of asserted himself.
Yeah, crossed the lines, especially since it was a professional, situation where I was hired as a background singer.
But you got blamed for it, which is like the whole trip to me.
Yeah, of course. So it's especially since it was a very new, like I just moved to the States, new school, new people, new faces, new dynamics. I hadn't had this kind of a dynamic back home in Germany yet. Not saying that this is a like particular like problem for the American music business field. That happens everywhere, I'm assuming, but it is definitely me being so new to the situation didn't help the fact that I then also didn't know who to talk to about it.
Yeah.
And also this person being technically in a higher position than I was, also being taken more seriously. There's so much that plays a role into it, but
it sounds really just isolating and kind of scary.
It was isolating, it was scary, but I think it became more isolating and scary once I started expecting this kind of behavior. Because what saved me in the beginning was that I didn't expect this kind of behavior. I was so certain. Well,
it still sucks that you have to be aware of it and
totally.
kind of almost like you said, expect it to happen. And then with that, it's like when you're they say when you're driving, the safest way to drive is to assume that everybody else is going to make a mistake. But that's not a good way to do that, right? Like you want to be able to think that you follow the rules and everybody else also follows the rules and everything works out. But
yeah, so we don't want, we shouldn't be living in a world where the people doing things right are considered naive or even stupid, like you should have known kind of mentality. And I didn't know better. and I didn't know how to communicate this kind of a problem. And so I guess I had to find new tools. And even so, I guess my communication skills in this weren't ideal. And I also didn't feel like I had the support system in place yet. So I created my own support system, which in this case was, okay, learn how to do production yourself.
Yeah, and that's amazing.
So, and that goes then in a lot of different fields. So like the same with the cancer. So like in the beginning, when I was first diagnosed, I had less than a third of my lung capacity.
Jesus.
So like speaking was very hard. Singing was out of the question, and I'm a singer. So it felt like my emotional like coping mechanisms that, as singers, we put our emotions into our songs, our singing was no longer there. So I can't remember who said it, but it was like strength is directly correlated to your amount to adapt, how much you can adapt to a situation.
I like that. Yeah.
So it's like in that moment I had to adapt. So I couldn't sing very well. So what do? I find a new outlet for me to like express my feelings, and also I managed to then like translate that musically. So when I was in the hospital, I'd have my laptop out and all my MIDI keyboards and like would make my beats, and they were very electronic based. The little bits that I could sing were heavily auto-tuned because it was just a wisp of air, and that became like an artistic choice. So like beautiful. I take back what was out of my control in that situation, which has been my surviving skill, as long as I can remember. So
it kind of reminds me of the very first thing we started talking about when I hit that record button was like back then when we made our song, and it was about like insecurities or whatever, and I was too insecure to even put it out. As people grow, especially for me, like as I've grown as an artist, my sound changes with the way that I grow as a person, totally, and just in life in general. So if you have something really drastic happen to you, like situationally, of course the music is also going to drastically change. So it makes total sense, and it's really cool that you've been able to make that work. I think that's really difficult, especially because if you are a singer, like it's such an emotional, like I always say that the voice is a really unique instrument because it transcends what any other instrument can do, because now you're adding the whole language factor. So in addition to having the notes that can resonate with people, you can now actually speak to them on a different level in like a way that people just communicate every single day. So to not be able to convey the emotion that you want to convey, I'm sure is really hard, because you must be feeling so many emotions at the same time about the fact that it's not the same as it was before, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And also, I guess maybe a lot of you can relate to this kind of feeling, but when there's such a drastic change or such a hard, I guess, diagnosis that you're dealing with, sometimes there's so much emotion in the room taking up the space that you might need to express your feelings. So there was so much like chaos and, I guess, panic within my circles, that once again, the way I react to things is like I have to balance it out. So to negativity, I balance that with positivity. To like emotional overload, I become more passive and also more introverted. And that I'm not always sure how helpful that is, but it definitely is a phenomenon I think that happens to maybe more people than they know. Is like you need to allow yourself to have the space to actually feel what you're feeling.
You said something really interesting to me in Panera Bread, kind of about that too. Could you reiterate it about the whole like after the chemotherapy sessions, like coming home and having like your younger persona kind of in your psyche?
Yeah, right, okay, yeah. So that's a coping mechanism I believe called like the inner child, that I've heard other people also describe to me, where you basically see yourself as the child that you once were, and you kind of treat yourself and say the things that you needed to hear as a child. And it seems to always come back to the day of chemotherapy. Whenever I get back, when I leave the hospital, I just kind of, I don't want to say that it's that I go back to my childish ways, because it's actually a very like forward thinking thing to do. But I definitely go back into like the cocoon of a child that needs to let out all the feelings that exist without judging them or like trying to place them in any kind of like psychological way. You just let the feelings exist. And that's kind of like my outlet. I become the 8-year-old me, and allow myself also to be negative and upset and angry at the situation.
Yeah.
But then once I do that, there's no longer the need to spread it out throughout the rest of my days, because I've allowed myself to feel that way.
Right. And you kind of grow an acceptance for it. I feel like, this is like kind of common knowledge, but whatever has happened to anybody as a kid is going to shape how they become as an adult. Like, okay, so I haven't really shared this with a lot of people, to be honest, and I can't believe I'm doing it like right now on this podcast, but my father comes from really traditional backgrounds and roots. So his father would like beat him when he was younger. And then he did that to me till I was about 15 years old, and my high school got involved and stuff like that, and it was like this whole thing, and then he stopped doing it. But that's something that I was affected by up until more recently than I'd probably like to admit. But I kind of went through the same kind of meditation ritual. It wasn't the exact same, obviously, but it's something that I kind of had to nurture within my own psyche and my brain, and then kind of come to acceptance with it and realize that I'm doing these things because of this that has happened to me, and that's okay. And then from doing that, it makes it better, because then you're not bottling up the emotion, you're kind of allowing it to just exist, and you're putting it out into the world. And I think it's something that really like anybody should be doing, because everybody has problems, right?
Oh yeah,
everybody. We were talking about this too, because we were saying that it doesn't matter like what you've been through. It's all kind of relative. I mean, there's a line obviously where you're probably complaining too much if you're complaining about stuff that really is so trivial that it doesn't matter. But at the end of the day, it's somewhat relative. So like the worst thing that's ever happened to somebody is gonna feel like the worst thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
Even though like as you were saying at Panera Bread, there's always someone who has it worse.
Right.
What's a way that you were able to kind of I guess shift that mindset as the problems got worse? Because obviously right now you're dealing with probably the most traumatic thing you've ever dealt with, I'm assuming, right?
Yeah, that's a story for another podcast.
What was the way though that you were able to finally kind of like shift your mindset and come to acceptance with it? Because obviously in the beginning it was really difficult, and then because the worst thing that happened to that point was the worst thing, but now this is the new worst thing. So how are you able to
yeah, that's an interesting one, because I guess what I would describe it as is coming to the conclusion, and this kind of, is what I mentioned earlier, that your happiness is defined by you and not through these outside influences. And yes, my happiness was tested. My inner self was tested with this crazy change in my life. But once I started doing things again that I recognized, or like taking back things that were mine, my voice, my independence, my like artistic outlets, all this stuff started coming back to me, and I was still sick. And so it proved to me that like this is a situation that I'm in, but it's not going to be my main story. This is not the lead storyline of my existence. And I gotta say, I remember you mentioned this in one of your podcasts about mental health, when you said that nothing is permanent. And that's literally it. Like, nothing is permanent. So the happy moments, the sad moments, the heartbreak, the love, cherish them when they happen, because it's a cycle, and everything comes and goes, and that takes off the pressure to have to like hold on to something, because it will be back.
Right.
And so I never take that into account when people are like, you will never do this again, or you will never feel this way again. That is, those are limits that I'm not going to set myself, and that no one else should set for anyone else. Like, you are your limit. So that's just kind of what I decided to do for myself, is to like allow the bad days, allow the worst days, and then they will end, and then things will be better, and they always have turned out better in the end.
I love it. Really quick, do you want to share some of the things that doctors told you you'd never be able to do, but I've literally seen you do today?
Oh yes, the list. Yeah, so I mean, we had definitely the talk about never being able to live independently anymore, and I kind of fought my way from living in a hospital room to being able to leave the hospital room to moving back into my parents to now having my own place in Berlin. So that one got disproved. And then people were saying that I'd probably be hooked up to a breathing device because my breathing wouldn't improve. I walk around without a oxygen machine, which is fantastic. I think after the first new chemo that I started, I think probably like a week after the infusion, I went dancing at some trash bar with my friends.
Sick.
Like this was a week after I hadn't been able to climb up the stairs on my own.
Wow.
Like
Holy
people
shit.
were carrying me up and down. I spent a month in a wheelchair. They said I wasn't going to be able to move on my own. I'm moving on my own. I travel across the Atlantic on my own. So it's so also when one of the hardest ones was you will always have cancer, because the cancer that I have is a mutation that's so aggressive that even if you kill the cells that have the mutation, that like triggers them to split quickly, because that's what cancer does. It will just grow back. So I went through 8 months of chemo last year, took 1 month break, and then in that 1 month, it grew back everything that had been destroyed with that 8 months of chemo, of that 8 months of fighting. Everything had returned within a month of not having treatment. And that was probably one of the bigger, setbacks that I had, was realizing that I'm putting in so much work to stay alive. I'm letting this medicine, which has a ton of side effects that aren't pretty, I'm allowing this to happen, and it can just all come back so fast. And so my doctor that I had in Germany, was very clear about that he didn't even see most likely. He said I'll always have cancer, but even though there are a lot of facts that do prove that, I don't allow that to be my only reality option, because now I'm also on this new trial. So there's new medicine.
Yeah.
And medicine and research is not a linear thing. It's exponential. So like you unlock one code and you find 10 new things. So that's kind of my peace of mind to help me sleep at night, is to remember that this is like a battle of persistence. How long can I stay alive in order for something new to be there to help me stay alive?
It's a really fucked up thing and a really fucked up situation, and there's really no two ways about it. But I usually when something bad happens to someone, I'm always like immediately like, knowing that it's not going to do anything, I'm always like, I'm so sorry that's happening to you. But I mean, for you, like, you were told you were never going to fucking walk, and we've been walking around all day. So I know that if there's anybody in the entire world who is told that they're always going to have cancer, if there's anyone in the world who is gonna eventually not having had it, it's definitely you. So I definitely have to commend you for that.
Thanks. Yeah.
That's so fucking crazy to me. And I didn't know that last part either till right now when you just told me.
Yeah, it's, these are, you never know how strong you'll be until you're put in that situation. So a lot of people have said things like, oh, I could never, or if I were in your position, and I do know that when you're not in the situation, that this all sounds insane and hard to wrap your mind around, but I am certain that every single one of us is actually stronger than we think. It's just that we are not put in that situation where we have to prove it.
Right. It's like working out. Like you build muscle by repeatedly lifting things that are heavy and meant to weigh you down, right? And it's kind of the same thing. Like you build mental strength by going through things that are designed to fucking weigh you down, and it's not until you do enough of that you become really mentally strong and powerful. So I think it's so fucking amazing that you have so much mental strength and prowess. Unfortunately, it's like kind of almost our time. We could talk about this literally all day.
Oh yeah, but, which we have, by the way.
We have, and it's been so dope catching up with you too. I do ask one question on every show except for the mental health one, obviously, because that was a solo episode. I think your answer to it is going to be, I think it's going to be definitely a unique one. So I'm so curious what you're going to say. But if you had unlimited money, no strings attached right now, what would you do and why?
Oh, well, no strings attached.
No strings attached.
Well, the thing is, I'm doing everything that I like to do without having the money for it. So I guess one thing that is a constant struggle in my existence is to see how much it stresses out the people I love around me. So if I could have unlimited money to at least make all the extra baggage lighter for my parents, my siblings, traveling back and forth, taking off the stress of health insurance, for example. I know that, we say like money doesn't really define your happiness, but it does play a huge role in the stress factor. And believe me, being sick, having to deal with the extra added stress of finances, like that is one of the bigger challenges for me, is to fight my way through the bureaucracy of being sick. And so if I had all any unlimited funds, I would take out all of that, because that's something I can control then.
Right.
The stress of my disease on my loved ones. So that would definitely be that. And of course, then I could travel back and forth between Berlin and Boston with no problem whatsoever, because that's what I've been doing lately, and it's kind of insane, but you do what you do when you're trying to be happy. Yeah. So that's definitely my realist answer, probably.
That's pretty much exactly. I didn't expect anything, but that's just knowing you and knowing how selfless of a person you are. That's totally not surprising to me.
I mean, when they're less stressed, I'm less stressed as well. So it's not super selfless, but you're in this together, right?
Right.
For at least I hope that for other people who are sick, that you have a support system.
Of course. And
you kind of are on this. Everyone plays a different role in it, but
and you're kind of realizing who's really in your corner. I'm sure.
Totally, yeah. So if I can make that, if I can contribute that would be amazing, because then I'm playing my part, because I'm fine. I'm okay. I'm doing fine, but my family, they need some extra help.
Touche. That's so fucking amazing. I wish I had a word better than fucking amazing. I feel like I've said it so many times just because I don't think a word exists for what I really think about what you're doing and how you're dealing with everything. So that's fucking incredible. Do you want to tell the listeners a little bit about your vlog and your Instagram that I know is pretty successful?
Yeah, so you can follow my story on my Instagram page, which is Beats in Bed. And there, basically, you can find my music and also a link to my vlog, which is called Flowers in My Lungs. And there, like, I take you basically through the day-to-day of being a musician, artist, cancer patient, world traveler, all at once. And I also just recently started another Instagram page for people who've been wanting to buy my art, which is Flowers in My Lungs. And there, all the art that I've made during chemo, during my travels, during the, bad days where, walking was not an option, singing wasn't an option. It's just a whole story, basically, that I've managed to visualize. And if you want to, contribute to that, or even just, like, be a supporter from afar, I guess, you can look that up.
It's really amazing work. It's really fucking incredible. I would absolutely suggest you check it out. And Carla, thank you so much for being on The Music Journal.
Oh, thank you so much, Wes.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of The Music Journal. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you got a lot out of it. If you want to know more about me and what I do, I just put out a personal EP on Spotify. You can go to bit.ly/Wes Yee Spotify. And if you want to know more about music production, I teach an online course about it too. Just shoot an email to wes@homestudiohits.com and I'll send you an application. Just for filling out the application, I'll send you a free sample pack of sounds I use to make the instrumental you're listening to and more. All these links will be available in the show notes, so you can check them out there. And while you're there, if you feel inclined to rate this show 5 stars, that would really help me out. Other than that, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss an episode. Thanks again. Peace.